This is Marketing Jam, a show featuring the brightest minds in marketing. Marketing Jam is brought to you by Cyber Impact, the email marketing platform made specifically for Canadian small businesses. Go to cyberimpact.com/jelly, create a free account, and start sending CASL-compliant promotional emails in just a few clicks.
I want to welcome you to the Marketing Jam show. We have a very special guest today. We have Sean here from the Globe and Mail. He works in the Globe Content Studio. So I'm really excited to be talking with someone who is literally the personification of a print publication, doing stuff digitally, becoming a content marketing space and content marketing studio. And what does that actually mean? What does that mean for the Globe and Mail? What does it mean for the print edition? What does it mean for all things digital? And as well, Sean is an entrepreneur. He runs the entrepreneurship group right in Toronto. He knows what entrepreneurs are all about, and so we're really excited to hear from those two things. So, Sean, why don't you give us your origin story? How did you end up in the chair you are today, and kind of what were the kind of the stories along the way that brought you there?
Sure. So my background is in journalism. Although even before that, when I did my first university degree, it was in economics. Mm-hmm. So I do have a business background as well, yes, and a journalism degree. And as I was going through economics, I started to realize that business wasn't necessarily the first thing that I wanted to jump into from a career standpoint. So I had a roommate at the time who was writing for the school newspaper at the University of Western Ontario. And he said, you know, you're a creative guy. You should maybe come with me to the newspaper office sometime and see if it's something you'd be interested in doing. So I went and, was kind of immediately struck by the camaraderie in the newsroom there, by the conversations that were happening there, by the type of work that they were doing. I felt kind of right at home almost immediately and just started writing stories for them. And then became the features editor of the paper the following year and got a taste for editing in addition to reporting, and realized as I was finishing my economics degree that journalism was really the place that I wanted to be from a career standpoint. So I went to Ryerson and got a journalism degree here in Toronto. Did a 2-year program, and then got an internship at the Globe and Mail. And I think actually, even though the economics degree wasn't all that exciting to me at the time that I was doing it, because I had the combination of economics and journalism, it actually helped me land a job at the Report on Business section at the Globe and Mail because, at the time, it was a lot less common to have both a business degree and a journalism degree. So I think that actually really helped me get a foot in the door at the end of the day. So sometimes, karma's karma, right?
Yeah.
Funny enough, I'm not all that excited about business kicked in a few years later, and I was like, I'd really like to do something different topically. And the National Post was starting up at the time. And so there was a lot of movement of, personnel from paper to paper. And so the Toronto Star made me an offer to come and work at the entertainment department there. Oh, wow. And I'm like, entertainment, cool. Man, yeah, okay. That's more like it, right?
Yeah.
Let's do that. So I did a stint as the deputy entertainment editor, did a couple of other jobs at the Star while I was there for a few years. And then the Globe brought me back to work in the national department as an editor, and I've been here since that time. But in terms of trajectory into my current position, which is more of a content marketing role, this is where the sort of entrepreneurship side starts to come in, because a few years into my tenure here at the Globe, I started picking up more digital skills. And what I really wanted to do was start building something. So here we're coming full circle, where I was trying to get out of the business side. And now all of a sudden that business itch started. And so I was looking for a way to, use the business skills and the content skills together. So the editor-in-chief at the time said, listen, we've got this product we call Report on Small Business. It's a magazine that's once a month. It's intended for business owners, but we really need to transition it to a digital property because all the companies that want to sponsor storytelling around entrepreneurs are more interested in the digital space than they are in the print product. So we want to kind of sunset print and really move into digital. So that really required a full rebuild of the property, almost from the ground up.
Yeah.
So I rebranded it, started up social channels, and really turned it into a fully digital property and sunset the magazine property at that time, and really started to build a community in addition to the content that I was building out. And I learned two things from entrepreneurs at that point. One was, think bigger, right? Don't be satisfied with what you've got. Think about the other things that you can do on top of what you're already doing. So always think about what your next steps are and how you can get there. And secondly was, how do you use your skill set to make money, right? So what I was doing was more journalistic based at the time, but I was thinking, okay, I need to start doing some business development with this property. And so what I learned was the church and state separation between editorial and advertising worked really well for a really long time. But because I was operating a smaller property, I really needed money in order to do more of the things that I thought I should be doing, like running events, like creating more content, which required more freelance dollars. So I started making the leap into advertising to say, how can I get more advertisers to sponsor more of the content that I'm creating? Then I get more dollars to start doing business development around the property. So I was crossing the floor that really to that point hadn't gotten crossed very often. It was,
and what year was this? When was this?
This would have been 2007, probably 2008. So maybe 10 years ago or so. And, then I would work with the advertising department to come up with ideas that we thought people would want to sponsor. And then once we got those sponsorship dollars, we would, be able to actually make those things happen. So I started thinking differently about journalism and the contributions that I can make, because maybe the contributions I can make can go beyond content and into the realm of actually helping the company, the organization, make money to help fund the journalism. So then the publisher at the time said, listen, we could start experimenting with a product manager role for you. So I took a few properties, including the small business property, under my wing as a product manager and started packaging up the content that we were creating and taking that out to advertisers to sponsor. So kind of taking the small business framework and starting to build it out for more than just the small business property, looking at things like automotive and careers and real estate. And then after doing that for about a year, I found it was not as engaging and interesting as I would have liked. And so I moved in to my current role about 3 years ago, where I was just sort of overseeing the content marketing division here. And I've really been changing it and building it ever since. So again, still overseeing content and some editorial content as well as sponsor content, but bolting on things like, audio concepts and podcasts, doing more in the realm of like 360 video, starting to experiment with things like AR, raising our design game, doing more around data analytics and how do data and analytics get optimized to help inform your content, working in the innovation lab here and co-chairing that particular part of the business, and then thinking about how I can use some of those innovative products as part of my content marketing work, and really kind of stretching the boundaries, I guess, of what it means to be a journalist and a content creator, and getting into business development, as I've mentioned, and sales support, and looking at things like social media and paid social versus just organic, and really like taking a look at the suite of marketing and marketing technology tools and how I can use those tools and put them together with the great journalism, and then add in my work with sales teams and create a division that is unlike anything we've had here in the past. So that's, I don't know if that's a short or a long version of the journey, but that's the journey.
That's amazing. Use the term sponsored content a lot, and we hear the terms thrown around, advertorial, partnership content. Tell me about the usages of those terms and how you guys came to sponsored content.
Sure. So advertorial has been a dirty word for decades, as I'm sure you're aware. And I think there was good reason for it. Because if you'll pardon my French, most advertorials were shit. right?
Mm-hmm.
They were content that was produced really quickly, felt very much like advertising and not content, mostly ignored by an audience, and just not given the attention that would have made it better and smarter. When I came into this role, the first thing I decided I wanted to do was harmonize the quality of the content across the board. So how do we bring editorial principles and apply those to all the content produced by the studio and by our content marketing operation? So how do we make sure that everything that our audience is consuming from a content perspective that's created by my team looks and feels from a quality perspective like anything that we'd be producing in the newsroom? So that was number one. And then number two, we had to start thinking about terms. You have to label everything at the Globe and Mail, because if we're going to be, trusted by our readers and we're going to be transparent, we need to label things. We don't label our editorial content, but in my group, editorial content is really just an adjacency play for advertisers. So what they're buying is the media that runs next to certain types of content. So they're buying contextual alignment of their ads next to the content that my team is creating, but the content we're creating is being created without the advertiser input. But then we needed a label for content that had integration and had advertiser approval. And because advertorial was a bit of a dirty word, we landed on the use of sponsor content to denote the native advertising work that we do, which is kind of a cross between advertorial and editorial, the advertorial work that we do without calling it advertorial and putting a different kind of spin on it. And then at the bottom of that sponsor content storytelling, we have a disclaimer that says the content was produced by the studio and not by the newsroom. So we're being open and transparent with our audience, but we're also trying to make sure that we're creating content that is actually quality, that people want to spend time with. So we really aim not just to roll up a lot of page views for that content, but also make sure that we have high engagement levels with it as well, high active time spent on it, whether it's a video or it's a podcast or whether it's text and photo. The aim is to get people to spend as much time with it as possible.
So if I'm a 30-something-year-old and I've got a house I'm renting, or I bought a house and I'm like, man, I'm an adult now, I'm gonna start subscribing to a newspaper, and I don't want to just get my provincial newspaper or my local, I want to get a national paper. How would you describe the difference between someone who should subscribe to the Globe and Mail versus someone who should subscribe to the National Post? What type of people are they?
Sure.
Yeah,
it's a great question. I mean, listen, you've got to make decisions based on what you want as a consumer, right? So why would somebody get a Spotify subscription over an Apple Music subscription, right?
It's a great
Same thing.
Yeah.
Some people will have both because they're getting the service that they want uniquely from each of those two platforms. So really, it's like any other business. It's all about value proposition. So what's the Globe and Mail's value proposition to the market? Well, for the most part, you're going to start with politics and business. If you're a political junkie or you're a business junkie, the Globe and Mail is going to be a great value proposition for you. Those are two areas of strength. That said, we also have a strong arts department, and we also have a sports department, and we also have a lifestyle department. So we do offer other things in addition to our core offerings, but it's really those core offerings that I think are going to attract the biggest audience for us. So you've got to look at the Globe and Mail and the stories that it tells versus the stories that our competitors tell, whether it's the National Post or the Toronto Star or the Vancouver Sun or any other media organization. I think the way I like to frame the Globe and Mail these days is not as a newspaper anymore. It's interesting that people like you still think of us as a newspaper, and you're not alone in that. Yeah, exactly. The newspaper is a Globe and Mail product.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really define us. Like, I think of the Globe and Mail as a media organization, a national media organization. So are we covering the things that you, as a consumer of content, want to know about? That's really what it comes down to. Are you interested in politics? Are you interested in business and investing? And are you interested in some of the other sort of investigative journalism that we might do? You have to take a look at the opportunity to read some of our material for free, and then make a decision based on your consumption of that material as to whether or not you want the all-you-can-eat buffet, right? I mean, obviously, we have other benefits to our subscribers.
Yep.
We have events that you can find out about exclusively, and some of those are subscriber-only events. We have all kinds of opportunities for our audience to engage with us through the comments on our platform or through our subscriber-only Facebook page. There are entire pages on the website that are sort of dedicated to member services and the things that you get, as a Globe and Mail subscriber. We're in the business of providing information to people and getting them to have a better understanding of the country and how it works and how information can be conveyed to them in ways that will make them have a greater appreciation for Canada as a place to live and a place to work, right? So if a person has a sense that we're providing something to them that meets all of those objectives, then we're valuable and we're worth subscribing to. And that's really what we try to double down on. And that's the sell that we give to our advertisers as well, is listen, we've got this audience that appreciates the material that we're creating and is willing to pay money for that. And that's an audience that you probably want to reach as an advertiser, because we can, tell you more about that audience than you would otherwise know if you were, going with a provider that didn't have a paying audience.
So is that why you guys have gated content online? Like, I'll read something in print and then I'll look for it online to send to someone, but sometimes it'll actually say you must pay to see this, pay to play.
Yeah.
So that's part of the model.
The reason for that is that content costs money.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of my colleagues like to give the analogy of you wouldn't walk into a store and take something off the shelf and walk out just because it was there, right? Same reason why you pay for journalism, because journalism costs money, right? We have reporters that we need to pay. We have editors that we need to pay. We have people in production and advertising, and we, have an events business to support. I mean, we have all kinds of things that we have to pay for, and we need our audience to pay us in order to deliver them the information that we're providing that costs money. So we're like any other business providing a product or service. There's money that goes into it, and then we need to get money out of our customers in order to continue to put money into it. It's like anything else, it's a slippery slope, right? Once your business is starved of revenue, you can't provide the same level of service. So the more subscribers we have, the better journalism we're able to provide to that audience, and the better service we're able to provide to the country. I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking about a media organization like the Globe and Mail as being like a library, right? Like, we provide information and you should just be able to come in and get that information.
Yeah, you've been around for 175 years. You're like one of the forts in like Fort Langley here. We have a fort. You've just been here always, like Hudson's Bay.
Right.
Yeah.
Like people will contact me and say, hey, I need some research on X or Y. When can you get it to me? As though I'm here as a public service.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the issue. Another part of it, of course, is that we conditioned people to be able to get our information for free for a long time, because we still had a viable newspaper product at the time that was able to support our ability to give information away for free digitally. In hindsight, that was probably a mistake on our part, but we just didn't know better at the time because things were moving really fast. And we were trying to move as quickly as we could. And so we were going to make some mistakes along the way. That's just part of doing business, right? You pick yourself up and you move forward in new and different ways by responding to the market and by responding to your customers, which we've done. And then I think people forget that our newspaper product wasn't free and still isn't, right? So even before digital disruption, we provided a product that cost money and we charged for it, which is what we're still continuing to do today. To me, it doesn't really matter what form the information takes. It still has always had value, and we're just in some ways going back to the future by saying that value continues to exist. And we're starting to see some success as a result of that. The message is starting to get through. And I think people recognize that politics is complicated, that business is complicated, that telling great stories that require more than just a cursory glance at things that are going on in the world is complicated and time consuming. and that if you want that, it's going to cost you, but you're going to get a benefit out of it, in that you're going to know more about the world around you.
So you mean I can't understand the entire Canadian, political landscape by just reading a listicle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, no doubt. I'll let that. I'm letting that hang because I think you know the answer. But
No,
I do think that people feel that information is somehow just going to come to them magically
Yeah.
through their social feeds.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is if they were to take a look at the information that's being delivered to them in their social feeds, it's most likely coming from a media outlet.
Yeah.
Either because they're attaching it and sharing it, or because the information that they are sharing is coming from another source, and generally a media source if it has something to do with what's going on in the world.
Yeah. So you talked about the Innovation Lab. So our viewers that are watching, Globe and Mail, recently you moved into a new building. You've got an Innovation Lab there. Tell us about what that is and what does that mean for Canada and what does that mean for journalism today? And media, I guess, today.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was, I think, a result of us having more touch points with the entrepreneurial community. And not just business owners, but incubators like a Communitech or a Mars, or an innovation center in any, major city across the country, or even now in small centers, and recognizing that people are busy and innovation doesn't just come from you when you're doing your day-to-day job. Not because you don't have ideas, but because you don't have an outlet or the time to take those ideas and develop them. So I think one of the things the Globe recognized was that there are 700 people that work for the Globe and Mail. A lot of them had great ideas, and they would try to bubble those ideas up, but they never really had a platform to build them. And oftentimes, someone might say to them, this is a great idea, you should do something with this, but then there was no champion for those ideas.
Yeah.
So I like to use the phrase dustbins of history, and I imagine thousands of great ideas have been incubated in this organization over its 175-year history that are sitting in the dustbins of history because they just never had the opportunity or the support to do anything with them. So we created a space, literally and figuratively, where people could take those ideas and actually do something with them. So conceptually speaking, there are kind of two parts to the program. One is a 2-day innovation kind of teaching exercise where people can walk away from their day job for 2 days and learn from experts on how to take an idea and figure out whether or not it has business merit. So getting a little bit of money to spend, getting access to experts both inside and outside the building, and taking some time, not just in those 2 days, but as part of their jobs for a few months after that, because there are check-ins to make sure they're continuing to do it, to try to figure out whether or not there's a value proposition that's going to have any currency in the market. The second part of the program is the ability to pitch to an executive team an idea where it's a little bit bigger and more ambitious and might require, say, the help of people on our dev team or our data science team to build, where they're saying, if I can come out of my job for 3 months and work in a lab-like environment with these other teams around the building, here's the thing that I want to do.
Wow.
And then more funding is provided if the idea gets accepted, and we try to, kind of take 2 ideas at a time, at least every 6 months and sometimes every quarter, to give people that opportunity that they didn't have before, which is to, actually get the time and the support to build out ideas instead of just consigning them to the dustbins of history. So the challenge, of course, is keeping something like that sustainable. Because the resources that are required and the commitments that are required. So we're at a period now where we've been running the lab for about 4 years, and we're kind of evaluating all the projects that have been through it, trying to see what the end result was with those products, and making a determination as to what the lab should be going forward. Do we continue on the current course? Do we need to make some adjustments? Because I think, like anything else, like any other business model, you need to do an examination every once in a while to see if things need to be changed or adjusted. And that's kind of the period that we're in now. And I think in the next sort of month or two, we'll have a better sense going forward of how we plan to continue operating it.
Very cool. So those that are our viewers that are in PR, public relations, and what sort of advice would you give someone who's pitching you? Being in the position you're in, those that are listening to the show are like, I've always wanted to hear from Sean. I can see him now. And what pitches do you love? What advice would you give? And what are like the worst pitches that someone could do? Maybe you just want to stay positive and not go negative. But
yeah, well, we can go either way. I think the biggest mistake that people make when they're pitching is that just pitching something makes it interesting. In other words, they don't reflect on why they're pitching and what the value is of the story they're trying to pitch. As an example, I get a lot of PR pitches where I'll read like the first 3 paragraphs and I'm lost as to why this person's even writing to me.
Yeah.
The reason I keep going is that oftentimes the real story is like 4 or 5 paragraphs into the pitch. Because they spend so much time saying, this is an awesome company. They're making a ton of money. They're doing really great things. It's not a pitch. That's like what every company aims to do and what, 1 million companies across Canada potentially are doing. It's about finding the thing that you're doing that maybe has some news value or maybe is exclusive. Maybe there's like a big funding announcement, for example, or maybe there's a partnership with a big partner or a government body that's going to be announced. You got to give the Globe and Mail a reason to get excited about something. We like things that are exclusive to us, like come to us first with something. We like things that have news value, and we like things that are trend-worthy in some way, that speak to something that's going on that people we know are interested in because there's data out there around it, there's social listening around it. So it's about doing your research and getting a sense of what it is the Globe's audience would be interested in vis-a-vis the thing that you're pitching. So I use companies just as an example, but it could be anything that's lifestyle related or sports related or whatever, same applications. And then I think the other thing you have to consider is, who am I pitching this to, right? The newsroom's got 200, 250 people, editors, reporters, right? You got to target your pitch. You got to show an understanding of the organization, and show that you're actually consuming the information that the organization is producing. So if your pitch is arts related, well, who's the arts editor in the department that this is most likely going to be of interest to? Who's the reporter that is most likely going to be writing about the thing that you're trying to pitch? You want to go to those people directly if you can, because if you just do a blast, which is very typical for PR or communications companies, they're like, well, who did this go to other than me? Yeah. Who else is getting this pitch, right? Why isn't this just being targeted to me directly? The stuff that's directly targeted, where you're like, hey, so-and-so at the Globe and Mail, love the work you did on X, Y, or Z. I know this is right in your wheelhouse. I've got something I want to tell you about, and I'm going to do it in like 2 sentences because I know you don't have a ton of time. And if you can sell them in 2 sentences, you've got a good idea. If it's going to take you 5 paragraphs to do it, it's probably not a great idea. It's probably one of those amorphous, kind of broad-based concepts that is really more of a, I just need something to pitch on behalf of my client, as opposed to I actually have something to pitch that's of value.
Part of the Globe and Mail, you publish op-eds, people's opinions done in editorial fashion. How do you know when it's a good op-ed or a bad one? What would you give as advice that way? Outside of the pitches, but someone gives you an article and a platter. When do you say no, and when do you say yes?
So op-eds live and die on the news, right? Yeah. So first and foremost, you want to write something that's literally off of a news story that's in that newspaper that you just held up, right? Like, what is going on in the world right now that I know a lot about and I can add value to? Cool. That's always going to be the most important thing you can do. Secondly, it's not about you. It's about what you know. So you don't want to insert yourself or your business or the company you work for into your op-ed unless it's super relevant to the conversation, because you're literally part of the news cycle. Or that organization is part of the news cycle, right? So if you're, a business that's in the news and you want to kind of show, your side of the story or talk about your side of the story or your take on the story, then it makes sense to insert yourself. But if it's just a commentary on something that's going on in the news, then it's really more about what you know as opposed to what you do or who you work for. And then the other thing to consider is, what's your argument? What are you adding to the conversation that's new and different? Are you just reinforcing what's already out there, or do you have a perspective that's unique in some way that's going to provide value because it's not something that we've heard about before, but it's still relevant to the conversation?
Very cool. It's very helpful. Thanks, Sean. We're going to switch gears here a little bit. With your experience with entrepreneurs that are out there that are listening to the show, they have a lot of options. They get recruited to tech, McKay Forum, EO, YPO. Like, what's your advice? How do they navigate that landscape? And even your own organization, you've started your own, entrepreneurship society. How would you help an entrepreneur navigate that world with someone I feel like has a more agnostic perspective on the landscape? How do you distinguish between all these orgs you could join and what should they join and why should they?
Yeah, I mean, that's a classic question, right? Like, I get asked all the time by startups, like, should I join an incubator or an accelerator? Yeah. And that's a really tough question to answer. I mean, they provide fantastic support, but the thing you have to remember is they're geared towards the pitch process and at the end of the day, helping you make money. Now, don't get me wrong, funding's insanely important to a startup and everybody needs it because not everybody can bootstrap. I mean, I'm a fan of bootstrapping, but I recognize the difficulties of it and the drain that it can be from a stress perspective, from a lifestyle perspective, from a friends and family perspective, and the pressures that you can be under when you're doing that. But you really need to understand that it's going to take away from your opportunity to build your business, which first and foremost is the most important thing. I think a lot of business owners feel like they need to do a lot of marketing and a lot of pitching in the early stages. If I'm going to, try to give some real world advice, it's very much about just putting your head down and building the right team and just getting your product and service in market and having that minimum viable product or MVP out there. And then really starting to get a sense of, okay, do people actually want this? I think that's first and foremost your biggest issue. We talk about giving away content for free. A lot of startups will give their product away for free as a way to test it. But that's a really difficult thing to do because a business doesn't live and die on something that you're giving away. A business lives and dies on people being, actually in the market to pay for that product or service that you've created. So to me, that's the thing that you need to be doing in the early stages. Now, if you really are in tech and just getting a product out there for people to test and try, and you're, really thinking more about a freemium model, you're going to start by just building something out that you're just going to put out in the market and see what kind of audience there is out there for it, then I think the incubator or accelerator model could be really good for you because it really is all about marketing. It really is all about like having a pitch deck and rolling up some, funding dollars because without them, you're done because you're not actually charging for anything yet. So I think it's really, being real with yourself as an entrepreneur and thinking, is the most important thing for me to get something in market to see if people are willing to pay for it, in which case I'd say just keep doing your thing and, don't worry so much about the networking and the incubator accelerator model, or are you someone who's just trying to find the broadest audience possible and then you're going to make money off that audience once you've secured them. And then I think that incubator accelerator funding model, pitching model is probably the right one for you.
So are you a Android, iPhone, or BlackBerry guy?
Android.
Android, okay. Now are you a whiskey or wine guy?
Both.
Okay.
Actually, my primary alcohol preference is beer.
Okay.
I love the craft beer movement because I can go into just about any bar these days and there's 18 to 50 beers that I can try, many of which I'll never have tried before. So that's, number one for me. But, I certainly like a nice glass of red wine when I can get it. And, whiskey's sort of a nice thing to have after dinner type of thing. So, I'm not picky.
Have you tried the vodka soda movement yet that's been happening? It came out this last summer.
No, I've
Okay.
actually been more of an old-fashioned movement kind of guy.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like still the number one bar drink out there. And
Yeah.
I was never really that into them. Like I'd never really had
Yeah.
them all that often
Yeah.
before, but for some reason recently in my social feeds, I've seen a
Yeah.
lot of references to like the old-fashioned still being the number one drink of choice. So I've had a couple of those lately and been enjoying them.
Okay. Tim Hortons or Starbucks?
I'm more of an independent coffee shop guy,
Yeah.
but
Nice.
sometimes caffeine is caffeine, and I'll just go to whatever's closest.
Okay. Air Canada, WestJet.
Um, Cheapest price,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be honest.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I'm fine with either one, and
Yeah.
generally it's about price and where I need to go.
So Sean, on your Android, what are the go-to apps that you use on a daily basis? What are the ones that you can't live without?
Yeah, so listen, I'm a news junkie, right?
Yeah.
So the primary apps that I'm using are Twitter,
Yeah.
Facebook.
Mhm.
I look at Snapchat and Snapchat
Yeah.
Discover. So I'm not sort of active as a user on
Well,
Snapchat,
yeah.
but I'm certainly
But
looking at the platform and the things that are being
you're,
created on there.
you're swiping left.
Instagram, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Instagram, obviously, big deal for me. And then I check CoinSquare a lot because I like to
Yeah.
see where my crypto is moving,
Yeah.
just because that's always kind of up and down on a dime, and
Yeah.
like every minute counts almost in a lot of ways. And then I'd say I use my device to check email just because
Mhm.
I get a high volume of it, and there's just so much going on in my line of work.
Mhm.
And clients tend to connect with me through there in addition to the
Yeah.
people that I work with. And then
Yeah.
Slack. Like
Yeah.
Slack for me is just a great comms channel, and not just
Yeah.
for the globe,
Yeah.
but for like the Elite Marketers
Yeah.
Association that I'm part
Yeah.
of, or the Fireside Conference group that I'm part of.
Yeah.
So I'm finding there are a lot of ways to connect with people now on Slack
Yeah.
that I don't think I was using in that manner even like 6 months ago. So I do
Yeah.
find I'm getting in there more often and looking at conversations on the
Mhm.
different channels that I've joined.
That's really cool. Have you interviewed or met Stuart yet, the creator of Slack?
Which, no. Oh, yes. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I met
Okay.
Stuart years ago. He came into the Globe, and I did a
Yeah.
video interview in our studio here. So this was even before Slack. This was
Was
when
this
he was still
Flickr?
doing Flickr. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Come on,
Um,
Flickr.
yeah, man. Yeah. So I think, it was years ago. So either Slack was just launching or it had yet to launch. And I just brought him in because I was still running the small business channel, and he was, just a great entrepreneur. And so we just kind of talked about him and his entrepreneurial movement and businesses. And we talked a lot about what his plans were for the future, probably more around photography than anything else. But I've kept in touch with him over the years and tried to get him to come back to the Globe now that Slack is such a big deal, to do conference and stuff like that. And he's great. He always responds to me, and we just haven't had a chance to make it work yet. But I will keep trying, and I will land him eventually. So I will see him again, I'm sure.
Okay. So, Sean, I need to ask. It's ironic because you are you're coming from the newspaper, but I want to know what sort of books, magazines, and podcasts that you consume and that you'd recommend to others that are watching the show.
Yeah, sure. So books, I'm a fiction guy, but I do read some nonfiction as well. So I'm reading both a fiction and a nonfiction book at the moment. The fiction book's called The Paying Guests. It's by an author named Sarah Waters. It's long, so it's one of those sort of bedside books that I'll probably have next to the bedside for about 2 months. But it's a cool little yarn about a woman who's in her 20s in the 1920s, and how her family comes on some hard times, and they have this big old house, and they need to take in some paying guests, some tenants for a period of time, and it's all about her interaction with this married couple that moves into the house. So pretty cool book, and I'd recommend it. I'm about a third of the way through it. And on the nonfiction side, I'm reading a book actually by one of my colleagues. Her name's Anne Hui, Hui, and it's called Chop Suey Nation. And so Anne grew up in Vancouver.
Yeah.
She learned about her family history and around, I don't want to give too much away, but around, some entrepreneurial ventures by her parents before she was born. And she wraps that in with a tour that she did from coast to coast, so west to east, starting in Victoria and ending in Newfoundland, and visiting all the Chinese restaurants that were in big and small towns along the way, and not just writing about the food and its history and the Chinese Canadian cuisine history, but also about the owners of those businesses and the conversations that she had with them along the way. It's a really great read.
That's cool. That's cool.
Podcasts. Yeah, podcasts. So I listen to The Daily, which is the New York Times podcast. I know lots of people love that one. I listen to Startup, which is, of course, of interest to anyone in the entrepreneurial community. And now I'm actually producing podcasts. So that's actually sort of taking up a lot of my audio time. So we just wrapped 3 podcasts, which are all now in market. One was a retirement podcast hosted by Rob Carrick, who's one of our writers, called Looking Ahead. We had another one that I'm hosting called Industry Interrupted. That's all about big industries that are continuing to be disrupted. That was a 7-part series. And then we also did one called I'll Go First, which is all about entrepreneurs that are starting companies in brand new industries.
Wow.
So industries like cryptocurrency, AI, robotics, machine learning. So that was hosted by a woman named Takara Small. So I've been kind of deeply embedded in just, getting those recorded and off the ground, and obviously edited and in market and distributed and promoted and all those good things. And then what else did you want to know about? Books? Oh, magazines.
Magazines.
Right. So I read Inc. and Fast Company because I like design and small business, obviously. I read Entertainment Weekly because I like to keep up in the pop culture world because, that's obviously important. I read The Economist, of course, because that's nice deep dive stuff when it comes to the news and analysis. And I think one of the big values that print still has is it gives you opportunity to reflect. So I think the reason you like your Saturday newspaper is it gives you time to be away from your screen and really just kind of look and think about the content that you're seeing in front of you, and it gives you a little bit more time and a bit more headspace to consume it. And I find something like The Economist is a pretty valuable way to be able to do that.
That's awesome. So looking ahead for this year, we've got a lot of brands and agencies listening to the show and watching the show. What are you seeing as the trends coming up for content marketing?
So the thing that I'm most interested in right now is what's going on in the browser space. So have you downloaded the Brave browser?
No.
Okay, so the Brave browser was created by the former CEO of Mozilla. So Brave is a blockchain-based browser. So it has a built-in ad blocker. Now that's not great news for a content marketer, but at the same time, you can't ignore the forces that are going on around you. So it's got a small user base at the moment, but what's interesting about it is the way the product is going to evolve. So it's a token-based system. You can earn tokens, and then you can spend those tokens by, kind of rewarding the websites or the organizations that you want to reward with these tokens. So they're like basic attention tokens. So I think what we might see in the future is the ability for you as a user or a consumer to say, I'm willing to watch an ad by company X, and then you get rewarded with tokens for viewing those ads. So what does that mean? That means
on Reddit.
That means that as an advertiser or a content marketer, you're going to want to be creating stuff that people actually want to consume, because they're going to have to watch it all the way through to get their reward. So it's going to change, I think, the way that content marketing is created and marketed, right? Not in the near term, but certainly something we all need to think about as marketers and how we're going to respond to a scenario like that if it starts to get more popular. And then an organization like the Globe and Mail is going to have to think, well, how do I get people to reward us with these tokens that they're earning? Well, that's going to be by giving them great journalism that they, may want to reward with tokens when, say, they read a story that they really liked or really valued. So that's number one. Number two, I think you need to keep an eye on AR. And it's not like AR isn't out there, but right now, really great AR really requires the use of an app to get a great experience. Yeah. You know as well as I do that getting people to download apps to do just about anything is getting harder and harder. There's so many of them out there. They take up space on your phone. People really only use probably about a third of the apps on a regular basis that are actually already installed on their phones. So I think once we have mobile web-enabled great AR experiences, AR is really going to take off, and I think it's actually going to overtake VR as the sort of hot new marketing format. So that's something that we're always looking at. And then I think design is insanely important. The reason I like magazines like Fast Company is because they package content with great design, right? Yeah. Quartz does that as well. When you go to specific sites, the way that you engage with those sites is going to be based on how good the package is that is kind of hosting that content. So when content looks great, you're going to spend more time with it. So even on my team, we've sort of doubled down by hiring a pair of designers who do really great work for us and make the content look really great, so that it's not just great content, but it's a great package as well. And I think from an attention standpoint, that's going to become increasingly important. It's already important.
Wow. Sean, you've had so many incredible nuggets on this show. I really appreciate your time. And again, this is not sponsored content. I do subscribe to The Globe, both at our office and Saturday mornings. My wife and I, for the last, since we were married, have been spending Saturday mornings reading The Globe. But I pay for it myself. So just so it's clear, I am speaking. And just I wore these special cufflinks just for you. They're little miniature globes.
That's nice.
just for you, Sean. I want to thank you again. Thanks everyone who joined us today.